Nice to see you. Jayashree, good time. Should we just begin the
Yeah,
session
I
now?
think
Yes?
yes.
Okay, great. So, good evening and welcome to everyone. Would just like to extend a warm welcome on a Saturday at 4:30 p.m. It's great to see that we've come into the session. I'd just like to go back a year ago. Around this time is when we actually, Adhyayan started the collaborative learning studio, and which is an online platform, and that's where we started the community of practice. And the community of practice is a space where all educators come together and showcase and share their best practices, their queries, concerns, and actually deliberate on many issues. Since last year, we've had about 27 COP sessions. Today is the 28th one. And I'm really happy about that. We've had over 3,700 educators over the course of these sessions come in from around 240 schools and 15 countries. And I think that's a great online community that has been created. We've had experts, sharing their perspectives, insights, practitioners sharing their learnings, educators they're sharing their stories, stories of success, stories of failures, so stories of persistence. And we've just completed the 6-part webinar series on what a blended school looks like, with some amazing stories from our Adhyayan partner schools. And as you know, and most of you do know us, but for people who have joined in today, you can definitely sign up for a free consultation with Adhyayan to know more about how we can support you. And Annette will put down the email and the phone number in the chat. So at any time, please feel free to contact us. So this is Neha, a director at Adhyayan, and it's a hi from Mumbai. We are in the midst of another lockdown, and this is a huge one in terms of, I think it's emotionally now draining everybody. And the second wave, we've clocked around 11,000 cases, each day. And that's like, these are the numbers. We don't know how many of them still go unrecorded. Yeah. Anyway, I think many states in the country are also moving towards this second wave right now. And this is definitely affecting schools in a very, very big way. Just when there was hope for starting physical classes, and we had all started gearing up to saying, okay, we're going to start schools. Maybe we'll have our secondary kids come in, and now the, middle school, the primary, and we'll slowly start doing that. I think we're back to square one. And this is I would say, a cruel reminder of the fact that we are actually living the new normal that we've been talking about since a year. In fact, the conversation right now is also around the fact that the teachers should have been acknowledged as frontline workers. And what if, and they should have been actually considered for vaccination. I have heard that some places have started off, but there's no like official, intimation on the same. And I think that is something that all of us are hoping to, because at least if the teachers are kind of vaccinated, we'll be able to start off schools. But then that also has also started another debate about the fact that maybe education is really not essential. It doesn't come in the essential services. So what are we talking about? And I'm sure a lot of the social media, if you've been tracking, is having this conversation about the teachers and I guess even if the teachers were to get vaccinated and we move towards that, and which itself is a big community, the next question is about students and what precautions then do we need for our students, for our schools, and obviously logically thinking, we're always looking at safety as being our utmost top priority. So safety of our teachers, safety of our students, safety of all the stakeholders in the school. And hence, today's topic, revolves around safety. So let's use this moment right now to, without thinking too much, what are the words that come to your mind when you think of safety? Yeah. You have a link in the chat. Can you just access the chat and put that down there? Access the Mentimeter link, and it will very quickly share the Mentimeter link.
I think Anna has just put the link in.
Great. We have some friends who are still joining in.
So you might want to put the link again. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So try and access. If you have any difficulty accessing the link, please let us know.
Is there some way in which we could have a look at the words here?
Yes, you have them here.
I think a couple of people have just joined in. It's on the chat. I'll just try and put the Mentimeter link again, if you can quickly get onto it and have a look. Oh no, that's a different thing.
Yeah, I've just put the link in again. Yeah.
Okay, I don't know if we can cancel what I put in, because it clearly I couldn't save the link. Yeah, it's all right. It doesn't matter. Okay, so
lots of words coming around
almost
safety.
no word getting repeated. That's interesting.
Yeah. So social distancing, pretty close. So we're talking about mental, physical, sanitization. Yes, sanitization, close. Safety in schools, internet, great. COVID free, yes. We've had 7 responses, and I mean, people who have keyed in multiple words. Please feel free to add in. If you have any difficulty accessing the Mentimeter, you could also put it into the chat. Any words that come to your mind, put it onto the chat, no issues. Yes, so I think we've reached a plateau of 7 people who've added their inputs here. And we have 1 more in the chat. 2 more, okay. Assured interest, internet, emotional safety. Absolutely. So it's about defining what is safety, right? We've got all these words that come to our mind when we're talking about safety. So what is safety, and is it safety? One of our responses here says COVID free. So it's freedom from the virus that we would consider as, safety. Is it physical safety, mental safety, emotional safety. It's just so many thoughts that come into our mind, which we can see through this word cloud. And needless to say that it's really important to know where we stand for each of these interpretations of safety, right? Which we have written, where we are as a school, which are the areas that we're really, strong in. Are there areas where we need to maybe tweak our processes or look at that, recognize if there are any gaps or any areas that we need to work on? And that's given rise to to today's topic, which is assessment of school safety and well-being in these challenging times. Um, and there we go with internet getting a bigger piece in the center there. Yeah, and there's one more which would add to it being bigger from the chat. So, yes, let's keep this as words in the background. And in today's session, we have Kavita Anand, who's the co-founder and executive director of Adhyayan, along with Prashant Kakkar and Varun Kareparambil. Kavita is going to be in a conversation with Prashant and Varun. And I'm going to take the liberty of introducing all three of them. Hopefully that I will do some justice to their rich, I would say, experience that they have had in various capacities. So Kavita, as I said, is the co-founder and executive director of Adhyayan Services as well as the foundation. And Kavita has been into education since the past 30 plus years. And she's an Ashoka Fellow, started her own play school, and then went up to set up Shishivan, an ICSE school in Mumbai, which was one of its kind, as it was ranked among the top schools in Mumbai and Maharashtra. Kavita is also a TEDx speaker and has published a lot of research papers and articles. Please do follow her on, her social media. Kavita, you can put down your handles on chat, as well as the Adhyayan, Adhyayan Ed. So you can follow her through Adhyayan Ed or even follow her as an educator. So thanks, Kavita, for, making sure that you're available on this day to have this conversation with Prashant and Varun, and also to let us know more about safety in schools. So let me introduce Prashant now, Prashant Kakkar. Prashant's recent 11 years have been spent in education management, skill development, ecosystems in India, entrepreneurial venture setup and scaling in physical education and sports, building a successful venture, and deep insights into governance, systems, and processes. We used a lot of big words. Yeah. So what he's currently doing is consulting with the Piramal Foundation for Operations and Launch at Scale, which is innovations within physical education, and launch at scale. And from the education perspective, which I understand also, Prashant, is you have been the chief operating officer of what people would identify and know is Karadi Path and, the Karadi Tales, and you've helped them grow their functions. So that's great. So welcome, Prashant, to this community of practice session. And that's Varun Kareparambil for you. Thanks, Varun. And I'm sorry if I've mispronounced. Is
you've
it
done
okay?
a fantastic
Yeah,
job. Neha.
thanks.
Brilliant.
So Varun is a risk management professional. He's an arts graduate from University of Mumbai with specialization in economics and then having done risk management courses. He possesses 16 years of experience with private security, risk management. He has clients across, I think, all continents. Is there any continent left, Varun? And you started your career in UK and have got a lot of experience across industries, is what I understand. You've also designed security for some high-profile projects, which I think our audience would be able to identify, which is, the Ad Labs, the Imagica, which is in Maharashtra, and he also for some housing complexes. He's assisted prominent schools such as DSP International, Bombay International, and Aga Khan schools to improve their security, safety, and emergency preparedness. So that's Varun for you. And I'd like to also introduce, Jayashree, who's here, who has been hosting a lot of COP sessions, and today it's my turn to host one. And Jayashree is also supporting, has always supported the community of practice sessions and is here again supporting us today. So welcome Jayashree from Bangalore today. And we have Annette and Gauri, who are our backbone. Without them, it's really impossible to put up a webinar. And thank you, Gauri and Annette, for being there. So let's come to the crux of today's topic.
Neha, hi, Shruti. No?
Yeah, hi, Shruti. So that's
sorry,
Shruti. Yes.
Sorry. It's just that we couldn't see any of them because your Mentimeter screen was on. If you could kind of pin everybody.
I've put it off. Yes.
Thank you.
Sorry, I've put that off. And would you like me to spotlight them? I'll be just doing that very soon.
Yeah, it's fine. I think we're
sure.
fine.
Yeah.
Community, yeah.
So Shruti came in at the right time when I should be introducing Shruti as well as a key member of the Adhyayan team. So Shruti helps the organization with communications. So let's get into and deep dive into the topic for the day. And I think quite a few schools have been able to fill in the Google form that was circulated with the invite, with the registration. And to give you a background, Kavita's designed the safety and well-being diagnostic, which will be used, which should be used by all schools to ascertain their safety quotient. Once you have used the safety diagnostic, identified the gaps, Prashant will be very happy to help you with identifying the processes that are needed to bridge the gaps. So we've also received questions from you, and the questions will also be addressed during the sessions. So over to you, Kavita, to give us a synopsis on the intent behind the diagnostic, the work that's been done, and how do you foresee it being administered in schools.
Thank you, Neha, and welcome to everybody. I think we all are aware that COVID's not going to disappear. We've hoped that it was going to, and things were going to come back to normal. But I think right in the very beginning itself, after the first 3 months, we realized we're going to have to live with this. And a lot of people have talked about how it's going to be very much like the flu, or once upon a time we had smallpox, or we've had polio, and getting rid of those have been extremely difficult and taken time. On a recent estimate, somebody had mentioned that it'll take 7 years for us to be able to deal with COVID in the same manner. And to see a world in which we can be on top of COVID, we can't afford to have 7 years disruption in education. So that makes Varun and Prashant extremely important here, just to sort of understand from them, because they've been working with schools and other organizations, what exactly is it that we can do to deal with COVID and run our schools. Without getting too much into my own discussions with the various schools, because I can bring that in later, I'm going to open the floor by asking Varun, you've seen the Mentimeter and what the words are like. Do they resonate with you at all? Also, if somebody hasn't unmuted, can I ask for the muting to happen? Yes, thank you so much. So Varun, yeah, over to you in terms of, do they resonate with you? Do you find that there are more words you would like to add? And what does safety mean to you, to an expert in the field?
A lot of words, Kavita, which of course all of us, we've been kind of coming across those words over the last couple of years, last year, right? But there are 2 words which I was surprised, which I didn't find in there. One is crisis, and the second one is emergency, right? we all are in the middle of a crisis, right? Today, when you talk about safety, school safety, these are not normal times, right? These are not times which was pre-pandemic, right? And all schools have gone through a period of immense uncertainty, and schools are today at the mercy of the governments, unfortunately, right? What you're seeing today is no different as compared to what you were seeing last year, right? Last year, somewhere around, I think, May, it started to peak, the first wave, and it took the country a good, I would say, about 4 or 5 months before the first wave came down. Now we're into the second wave, right? And you can see the trend going from one state to another, right? Similar measures, right? And just like you said, just when people were starting to see the light properly, back to square one, probably, which is pretty scary. And when you talk about stats like 7 years recovery time and all of that, it's absolutely scary. The question which I think all educators today are faced with is, how long can you keep the school shut? You have to go back to schools at some point, right? And can you truly be at the mercy of the measures being taken by state authorities, right? Which happens overnight almost, right? When you talk about lockdown, shutdowns, and all of that, and you don't know when you start to come back to normal again. So there's been a lot of firefighting, and firefighting is always expensive. So I think some proactive dialogue needs to happen.
Yeah, so Varun, when we've, as school leaders, we've been aware of bomb threats, fire threats, earthquake. We've had, a lot of SOPs around the whole business of how do you have drills for children to evacuate the building. And that's been a focus that has been always the forefront, because safety and security come before learning, right? If you can't keep children safe, how are they going to learn, was always our question to schools. And so how different is this kind of, a pandemic versus an earthquake or fire or bombs, right? There's a massive shift from physical safety to health. So in terms of safety as a professional, how much of a difference does that make for a person running a school?
Probability or likelihood, that's the biggest difference, right? So when you're looking at, let's say, a bomb threat, or when you're looking at a terrorist attack, or when you're looking at some other serious events, the probabilities of those events happening are very low, but the impact is extremely high, right? And also, it doesn't happen with every school. Let's also be honest about that, right? When it comes to terrorism, there are certain schools which happen to be a target. This is a very unique situation because this applies to everybody. And if you're talking about likelihood, we're in the middle of it, right? If you're looking at the vaccination numbers, and by the time we come to the younger population, I think we're going to go well into 2022, right? So which means, or probably even beyond, which means that, as you rightly said at the top of our discussion, Kavita, that we would have to learn to work and live with the virus, right? So this makes it very, very different, because it's the one thing remains common, that safety of children and also safety of educators, safety of everybody else connected with the school today is a massive priority, right? Because let's say your housekeeper or anybody else who would have probably received less importance today becomes equally more significant because they can transmit the virus, right? So in that sense, it's very unique, and it's going to be there for a longer duration. It's not one of those crises where you fight it for a few hours or maybe a few days or whatever, and it's over, and then you go into recovery mode. This is different.
Awesome. So I think there's an invitation to everybody in the audience right now to ask their questions of Varun and what he's saying. And we're going to bring Prashant in here, and then maybe have another question for Varun as well. And the question for Prashant would be this: you've been working with schools on what Varun has just described. as something that people realize they have to live with, and they have to bring in all kinds of systems. So what is it that schools are doing that is different or more than what they had done before? And what do you find them asking you for?
So I sense there is a sense of that fear of permanency, which is creating a sense of what next, as in terms of, and then this is also because it's that permanency is there, or the longevity is there. You're also getting and of course the schools are themselves struggling uh, to try and induce some of the long-term measures. Up till now they have actually from a safety context been only looking at it only from a very event-based contexts, uh, 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 and therefore to kind of get that shift to look at what you just hinted at, which is to look at it from a systems point of view, from a processes point of view, from attempting to even see this as a everyday monitoring. In simple words, you need to do everything on an everyday basis to ensure that you are safe. There is that bubble that you have created, and that bubble should be maintained as a bubble. Now that regime, sadly. Is only now getting, how would I say, embedded over the last over hit and try. And I say that hit and try because I've been speaking to schools across Pan India, and they're actually very limited to whatever resources they have. Number one, and on top of which, what is their sense of imagination, that they think there could be a safety element built into it, is where they would want to kind of course, it's layered by the ecosystem how and the noise that has been created around, which is, okay, you do 3 steps and everything is safe. And I think if life was just like those 3 steps, and like a magic wand of 3 steps, I think life would have been a very different life for all of us. So it's clearly not just about those 3 steps that will allow or that will help bring some form of watertight operations. And I think, so yeah, so I think, I hope I'm not blabbering. I'm just trying to give you an answer to what you've asked.
No, I think what you're saying is important because, what we've found, and this is something that I noticed as different from, say, the West, schools in the West, where there's a lot of adult supervision of every single child, right, in school. So there would never be situations where you would have children just left to their own devices. Whereas in India, we find children are trusted enormously. There is a great sense of freedom that children have on the playground, in the corridors, in the classrooms. They just left. I mean, there are so many times when we've gone to schools and found that the teacher is absent. There's no substitution person being found easily. So there are times when there are children in the class completely on their own devices. Children come to school really early because their parents have to drop them and go to work, and they are left to their own devices. And there's never been the sense that they have to be constantly monitored, right? But you're suggesting that monitoring will have to happen like super efficiently all the time, and that requires a massive change of protocol
and mindset.
Yeah.
And from first the internalization, and then of course from the internalization, the more important part is not I have mapped my 5 steps and I'm covered. There's bindas, absolutely. There's nothing much to do. I don't think that that realization that itself will be all in all. It might not be. There have to be some other steps that schools will only then, perhaps when they face that challenge, when they face that emergency, is when they will say, "Arey haan, mujhe ye bhi karna tha." And that too will be only for that event. Perhaps later on, even that gets digressed because there are other priorities that walk into the management kitty. So it could be to do with money, it could be to do with admissions. So many other things start to fall into that mindset. So therefore, I think it's about And it's hard as human beings. It's hard to kind of be regimentalized. First, accept new things and then be regimentalized into doing things on and on in some manner. It seems to be as if it's kind of a headache that I'm taking on, and that's the feeling that I get. When headache, there's a ROI to that headache, but people don't see that from largely that I have been speaking to, whoever I've been speaking to.
Sure. But Prashant, I mean, Varun, you would have noticed that, you've been doing safety forever, but this whole business of what Prashant is just pointing out, that this change in culture, the whole attitude that this is now going to be part of the way we live our lives. It's not about, okay, I've done checklists and ticked off boxes and now it's all sorted, right? It's in the file. And if an inspector comes, I can show them the file. So that file is no longer going to be adequate. And do you see shift in culture being possible at all? I mean, what do you think it's going to take for that to happen, Varun?
I think, Kavita, that we've already seen a shift in culture in many ways, right? I think it may sound a little controversial on my part, but I keep saying that what has happened in India and probably across the globe with the teaching going online is probably the biggest mass experiment which has happened, right? And there's been no planning in place for that. It almost happened overnight. And in India, where the digital divide is massive, I mean, massive is probably an understatement. No one's talking about that sort of an impact, but still, in the urban centers where students have access to devices and all of that, there's been a cultural shift. But this cultural shift is brought on. People have been compelled. You don't have a choice, right? Generally, when you do your safety audits, your security audits, and all of that, it may be a company's or school's policy that drives it, right? This is a situation, this is survival, which is driving it, right? Here there are consequences, and the consequence can be grave. And that's where it's essential that the shift in mindset, which is very, very difficult, of course, because you're also changing a lot of behavior patterns. And you're talking about working with students of different age groups, right? So it's going to be one hell of an exercise to kind of have that mindset change happen. But slowly and steadily, it needs to happen. There's no other way. At least till such point where there's this golden day in the world, which is a COVID-free day. I don't think that's happening anytime soon.
So we are looking at only from a children's dimension. The adults are the
adults too.
Believe you me, the adults are where one needs to do what one needs to do. And adults would mean, and I'm blaming myself as being the first in the line, to kind of see and even accept that change. The acceptance of the fact that, well, there could be other ways of building safety. I know of some way of doing safety, okay, all right, but there could be others also who could also kind of design something that will allow that permanency to kind of fall in. There could be some other thought processes that will allow we all consciously or rather, how would I call it, intuitively look at safety, but that safety isn't from your own lens and from your own yardstick. They are not really from, may not necessarily be from a certain systems view. It will not be from a very longitudinal view. Safety comes very, very instinctively. So it could be physical safety, it could be mental safety. These are all pieces that are very, I mean, that's my view to it. And people would need to change that view to saying, hey, listen, it's not just me, it's a whole organization behind me. And that organization consists of about 4 or 5 different key actors. Each of those actors are in a dynamic position. What am I going to be doing to each one of those in interaction, both at a mental level and at a physical level, and collectively, and talking to each other? I mean, those are some of the dimensions which are really lost in this whole loop. by just addressing this whole safety for me first. I mean, that does not, I mean, that's how I see this.
Yes, and I think it's also complicated by the fact that people don't know enough about the problem itself. I mean, they don't understand the virus. The virus then mutates. The minute people kind of try and understand it, it kind of becomes a different virus. And then you also have the issue of, okay, I'm vaccinated, so am I safe? If the other person is not, what does it mean? If the person has had COVID, is that person safe? And all kinds of myths surrounding this, right? So there is a lot of lack of knowledge of what this problem actually is. So how do you think a school can actually deal with the fact that every teacher might have their own opinion on what is safe and what is acceptable? Some teachers might have, played holy, and some people might be willing to go for weddings, whereas others don't want to, and then who is putting who at risk, and how do you deal with that whole human factor of like, this isn't correct because you're coming too close to me. You're not maintaining this distance where I feel safe. And that can be another simple thing of, two people managing each other's distances. So it's really complex. I mean, considering that there's a massive shift, and Varun, you said it's already happening, and we've seen it happening in airports and, in kind of public places where there is some kind of management. But even there, I mean, in a flight, I have seen people being told, don't get up till we tell you. And then the minute you move out of the aircraft into the bus, you're crammed into the bus. So at which point you say, like, what happened? Did the guy in the aircraft not talk to the guy in the bus to say, what's the right amount? So the same thing to do with school buses and, classrooms. And how does one, like Prashant is saying, deal with so many people? How do you see that happening in organizations which look at safety, bigger organizations, larger organizations?
So when you talk about larger organizations, let me just give an example of probably a private organization, right? It's easy. It's governance is easy, okay, because everything is in the form of policies, right? And if it's not enforced, your job is at stake, right? I think that's the biggest fear at the end of the day. So if we're looking at organizations like, let's take, for example, Reliance today, Wipro, Infosys, these organizations are a little more bold in terms of their decisions, and they know that they want to get their employees back to work pretty quickly, right? So while it's fantastic that they came up with policies saying that, your vaccination and your family members' vaccinations are going to be taken care of, right? Don't worry about it. But you also got to read between the lines. When they say don't worry about it, it also means that, hey, you know what? We want to vaccinate almost everybody so that we can get you back to the offices pretty quickly, right? You can't look, because work from home, just digressing slightly, is something which is a luxury that can only be afforded by certain sectors, certain industries, not by everybody. So in the private sector, it's much easier to enforce it. And especially there's a number of things that you can do in the Indian context. And that's where, going back to your point, Kavita, about adult supervision in the Western context is very different, because also the law says something else and the consequences are very, very different, right? Unfortunately, the law isn't strong enough in many ways out over here. So in that sense, I think when it comes to the private sector, whether it's in India or across, the rollout will happen. I mean, it will happen in terms of policies and all of that, so on and so forth, and people will adhere to a large degree. Everywhere there's going to be a certain percentage who may have issues, but that's everywhere, right? And I always have a simple principle, is that when the situation's complex, keep things simple. It helps with decision making. Because most times in a crisis, you don't have a lot of time to think. You've got to keep things simple so everybody understands things clearly. But we have a tendency of making things complex.
You're right. Yeah. So, Prashant, there's also the question, if you've worked with the school, about how do they manage this whole business of, I've got a small classroom, I've got 45 kids. If I have to maintain that distance, then I have to break it up into, half the children coming to school on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, the other half coming on Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. How do I deal with, the bus in terms of its costing, the fact that the school has to be open for an additional day, teachers may not want to come in, teachers who live at a distance who don't use school transport, using public transport. So when we're looking at policies, what have you seen people being able to evolve? Have you seen that working?
So Kavita, from little that I have understood, as far as transportation is concerned, I think all pervasive that I don't see many schools really even opening that space up. I haven't really come across many schools, or let me put it the other way around. Not that I've heard even a single case where they've opened up transport, uh, um, covering this whole piece of taking the child from home to school. At least in my little relationship that I hold. The question then, therefore, is only about how you mend your own ways. You pick your own ways to reach school, whichever way that might be. And parents, whoever have been forced to do that, find out ways to kind of ensure that their child reaches school. Namely, let's say a 10th grader or a 12th grader would reach school, irrespective, whatever be that distance. But the question then, therefore, is also the other mechanics that you're saying, that how do I build, how do I stagger attendance? How do I stagger, how do I even attempt to, because I've seen schools which are going back to the normal, 10th bache hain, it's very important, both have to come, they all have to be collected in one class. To hell with COVID, doesn't matter. And I'm talking of marquee schools, which I don't really want to name, but they've all kind of collected their children over and said, because they don't have that many resources, teachers, to kind of manage that. And the teachers themselves are struggling to kind of look at this hybrid model or synchronous model, where half the children are sitting at home and half the children are sitting here. And therefore, now where do I speak to, the camera or the physical sense? Where do I concentrate? I think that itself is a challenge. So I think schools will, and whatever that I heard of, many schools have adopted that same orthodox mode. Bring everybody in. We'll manage. We'll set the whole ball rolling. At least that's my perspective. I'm sure there would be schools who would be adopting the other way around. I'm sure there would be training that some of the schools would be doing to their teachers to help adapt it. But then the question is about one-sided. The other side is that the teacher should also be capable, competent, and acknowledgeable, and how do I call it, accepting with the competencies that she's got to now relearn to kind of get into that mode of teaching. So I think it's just not, but also having said that, over the last 1 year, I have had teachers and I have schools rather, who've been saying now teachers are they're very comfortable. Probably few whom I've heard of who are doing hybrid, kind of a synchronous model. Most of them seem to be just doing on a alternative day kind of a context. So that's where I stand. That's
Right.
what my answer is.
So that's what you've seen happen. And I think, Varun, to your point, I've heard regarding law, a principal telling me that the inspector in that space said you have to open schools because we as a state have decided you have to open schools, but if a child falls ill, you're in jail. And I think that's not exactly helpful to anyone to have the confidence to then open school and say, how do we do this? So here's a question in the chat saying, is this the time when all the vaccination of teachers and students should be done? Is that going to help solve the problem and start school? Like, just mass vaccinate and get them all into school.
You want me to take that question?
Yes, please. Yeah.
So while it's a pertinent question, again, in the Indian context, it's a tricky question. Look, we got to look at a few things which are happening in the country at the moment, right? I think everybody is fairly aware of vaccine shortage, which is a major crisis. People just don't recognize it at the moment because we have one major vaccination provider, maker, Serum, and they are facing challenges in the United States and in Europe where their critical raw materials are being blocked. And that's for a different discussion altogether. There's $400 million which they've asked of the Indian government, and I don't think that's going to come through. Bharat Biotech doesn't have the capacity to match the scale of a Serum Institute, which means that sooner or later, probably some other international players have to enter the Indian market. Probably we see names of Johnson & Johnson and all of these guys. So coming to the question, I think that one of the key things, and when this happens, is that definitely you can start with, the teachers getting vaccinated. I think number one, it's a sensible thing to do. And number two, it gives a lot of confidence, not just, within the teaching community, within school, but also the parents, right? It shows that the school is kind of getting ready, preparing for that day whenever school's going to open. As far as children's concerned, I'm not too sure right now, because I don't think there's been tests done on children right now, at least in India, okay? I'm not talking about tests which may have been done by Pfizer and these guys in the United States. DNA and all of that is very different. So they have to do the test over here. I don't think the children have been tested yet. And we're not talking about it yet because we're way away from that milestone. I mean, there's a long way to go. But if teachers have an opportunity, please go ahead, do it. Because you can start with certain experiments if you're willing to, whether it's the 1 day at school kind of thing or 2 day at school kind of thing. A vaccinated teacher will give an enormous amount of confidence to a lot of people, including parents who may be a little skeptical about this, right?
Great. So I think, we're going to have a quick sort of intensive discussion in breakout rooms on the 3 aspects that we've identified need to be taken up by schools. The aspects being the entire issue of policy, leadership, and governance, the social emotional space of being able to change culture, look at fear and how people connect with each other, and the third space of the infrastructure that needs to be audited in a particular manner and managed in a particular manner so that everybody can be able to come to school or use the school facilities and then be safe. So these are the 3 areas. We're going to open out breakout rooms. I think there's Neha will manage that in terms of which group stays on in this room, which ones go to the others. We're going to have a 7-minute conversation, not more than that. And then we're going to come back and ask a whole bunch of questions that were sent out in the Google form that you all have filled. Some of you, by the way, some schools have also filled data in, and we find it fascinating to see where it is that people have been able to identify and how many have identified that they have an issue. A lot of schools seem to be fairly on top of it, which is great to see that. And we would like to hear in the small discussion rooms, what are you doing that makes you feel confident and super, happy to have children back and open your schools again. So let's get into that. Neha, would you like to facilitate this breakout room? And then the 3 of us are going to be in different rooms, and so you can let us know so that we can bring back what we hear from everybody in those rooms.
Sure. So we have 3 breakout rooms. And the first breakout room is health and safety, which remains in this main room. Okay. So that's going to be breakout room 1. Then we have the second one that is social emotional learning. Okay. And the third breakout room is infrastructure. So when I open the breakout rooms, what will happen is that you will all get an invite. And you will be able to choose, but you will be able to choose from the 2 rooms. So in case you want to stay in the main room where the discussion is going to be around health and safety, do not choose the breakout room. Okay, you don't choose the breakout room, and otherwise the name will appear. You just click on that and you'll go into that breakout room. Okay, so Varun and the 3 speakers, Kavita, Varun, Prashant, which rooms? Yeah, you'll choose the rooms, right? Okay, great. Fine. So I'm just opening the rooms, and in case there is any difficulty, please just unmute and let us know. I'm just repeating once again, there are 2 breakout room options that will flash, but the one that is on health and safety, you need to remain in the main room. I've opened the breakout rooms. Are you all able to see that?
I can. So I think that what people need to know is that they need to scroll down, because after the names, the rooms show up at the bottom.
Yeah, the names are only visible to the co-host and the host.
No. Oh, okay, fine. So the others.
Not yet, Neha. Not yet.
You can't see the rooms?
Not yet.
Shruti, you're not a co-host, are you?
I am not a co-host, Kavita.
Yeah,
because I can see the names, but at the bottom of the list.
Yeah, Annette, can you just open the room for any reason? Because I don't know if my rights have been.
Okay.
Because I did open the room, but I'm not the host and you're the host. So if you can just go to the breakout rooms and open it.
Yeah. So actually, the breakout rooms are in progress.
It is showing, right? Because that's what it's showing me too. Anybody here who's been able to see it? Shruti, you aren't, so which means it's not there working.
Sorry, I think
No,
somebody
not
made me a
yet.
co-host too.
Not yet, Neha.
Do you know that on the bottom, you would be able to like see, you'll have to click on the icon of breakout rooms and see that?
On the bottom of
Participants are unable to see that icon at all.
Okay.
You
But
can't
I can,
see breakout rooms at the bottom?
Okay, what I'll do is I'll try my hand at this once again, very quickly. I'm just closing all the rooms and I'm recreating the room. Okay. Let participants choose, recreate.
Much easier to host a virus these days.
Yes, definitely. I think unwanted things are easier than wanted ones.
Tell me now.
See the icon now.
Yeah.
Super.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's there.
So go ahead and one group, just remember, if you're choosing health and safety, you need to not choose the breakout room and remain here. Okay.
So where could I then? I'll join infrastructure.
Sure.
Sure. Go
Let me
ahead.
see if I can.
Yes.
Who wants to be there?
Yeah.
So Varun, if you stay on in the main room, I'm going to the social.
Sure, Kavita.
Okay.
Fine. I'll stay on in the main room. Jayashree, can you be in the infrastructure?
Neha, where should I go? Where would you suggest?
Infrastructure.
Infrastructure. Cool. Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So people are still choosing and they're moving around. So we just wait for a bit. Varun.
No problems.
Has everybody made their choice? Because we have majority here. So have you all made your choice to be here?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I can still see people moving. Nevertheless, what we can do is start the conversation, Varun, on health and safety.
Sure.
And would you like me to flash the questions that we have around health and safety from the diagnostic?
Sure.
Yeah?
Yeah, let's do that.
Just give me a minute.
Yeah, Neha.
I think you're on mute, Neha. You're on mute, Neha. You're on mute. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, so these were the questions in the diagnostic that we have, which is around health and safety. And how would you like to take this on? And it's here for everybody to, I'm not sure if all of you have gone through these questions, but I can just very quickly talk about what broad topics are, the buckets are, and which is about policies. So does the school's leadership have systems in place to ensure the health of all students and staff? And it's talking about implementable policies, actively engaging and updated on medical health related emergencies and have built control mechanisms to reduce the reoccurrence. And the third one is regular skilling and upskilling of the stakeholders responsible for the operational challenges of maintaining the COVID-19 systems and protocols. So I think it'll be great if in this room we can have, our videos on. I think it'll just feel a little more personal and warm to talk about these areas. So it'll be nice for Varun to open the session, but it'll be good for everybody else also to share it. It needs to be an interactive one. So if you have questions, challenges, what's working, what you've tried out, please feel free to share that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it'll be nice to have people come live. But okay, we can start with this bit. So, of course, the first piece, the first question, I think we've been talking about policies. And policies, of course, is something that sits right at the top, right? I mean, that's where everything starts. So in my discussions with, school leaders over the past several months, there's been a fascinating observation, Neha, and it's been and that also has kind of led to this question popping up over here in the diagnostic, I believe, is that there's a clear gap in terms of an understanding that people need to have a clear policy on how you manage COVID and the risks associated with COVID. How do you lower the risks and so on and so forth. So that's been an interesting observation. While some schools have, I would say, been quite a few steps ahead in the game, a lot of schools have not sort of had some sort of policy in place. And it's been deeply fragmented. In many places, the approach being pretty ad hoc. But if there has to be a starting point, your policies are really important, because then you know that it's something which is coming from the school leadership and it's something which is non-negotiable, and that's what will drive your processes and your SOPs and your actions on ground later. Without policies, it's probably
Absolutely.
just wishing for luck.
Yeah, and of course, the pandemic didn't give us time to think about policies or, to go in that systematic manner in which we would have liked to. Nevertheless, we all jumped into it, got our act together, tried and, succeeded, failed, whatever in some of the things, but we all got on stream. And I think it's really important at this point in time, and which a lot of schools have, come back to us talking about the fact that, okay, now is the time to now start putting those policies in place, because at least, we've gone over the first phase of at least, getting online, getting the school moving. But now we do need to have these policies. So any questions around policies, please feel free to put them in the chat too. Yeah.
And just to add to what you said, Neha, and not being critical at all, because I still say that schools and teachers have done an incredible job in terms of moving on to this entire new learning style, right?
Absolutely.
But in the process, which I look at it as firefighting, because you've engaged in firefighting, a lot of people haven't had the opportunity, or probably haven't taken the effort to take these small building blocks on putting your policies together. before it's too late. I think it's time that schools start to put those policies, relevant policies, I would say, in place.
Yeah. So maybe if we all could use our reaction buttons and express a little bit about what Varun has said. Do we agree with what he's saying? Or if you have a question, put that on the chat. It'll be nice. Thanks, Anu, for putting that thumbs up.
And if you think it was crap, just give a thumbs down. That's also fine.
Great. And if there is something that you need to, ask a question on or even say something, please feel free. While I'm just going to move to the second one, which is about, getting updated, that how the leadership and management is actively engaged and updated on mental health related emergencies, and have they built control mechanisms to reduce reoccurrence. I think this is a big one.
Yeah. So here again, I mean, when we're talking about Neha, when we're talking about systems, right? I mean, every school we know is different in all sense, right? Whether it's culture, whether it's the way they operate, whether it's infrastructure, student population, and all of that. All schools are different, right? So one size never fits all. But at the end of the day, it's determining, what systems do you have in place. In terms of, yes, monitoring the situation is critical. To give you an example of what we use in the industry in general, when you're looking at safety or security, is typically a color-coded risk management system, right? Where you would probably have 3, 4, 5 levels of color coding, and basically based on the risk level or the threat level, you take certain measures, right? So you can only take those measures depending on the fact that you're monitoring the situation. And as the situation escalates, you change your risk level within the school and then take measures which are applicable to that particular risk level. So again, critical that you have those systems in place, and you don't want to find yourself in a situation where you don't have it, and then you have way too many heads on the table brainstorming at a critical juncture. Most likely it'll be a very bad response.
True, very true. Any insights, perspectives, or anything that we as educators in this room have tried, you want to talk or put your point across? Please feel free to unmute.
Hi, Neha. Can I just a couple of things that I wanted to add?
Please do.
We are a very small school and our numbers are quite small. So we did try a pilot of a blended learning for about 2 weeks. And by then the numbers started surging up. For the 2 weeks, we realized there was a set of parents who are willing to send the children to school, whereas there is a huge set of parents who wanted to keep the children at home. We did adhere to a lot of safety measures, which we thought was necessary. It went off very well. We didn't have any COVID cases or anything. And those 2 weeks made a huge difference on the child's social and emotional, connect with the teachers. And we had parents coming back and telling us those 2 weeks, there were about 6 sessions that we had with each child, and the room had only about 5 children and 1 teacher. And just those 2 weeks had made such a huge difference in the child's, the whole approach towards education and the connect with the teachers. So all these.
I know which age group are we talking about?
You're talking about really young children, pre-primary.
Okay. Yes.
So it was just, of course, we had, like you said, policies. We had a consent form that the parents signed and all those in place. However, the thing is that unless and until we start the process, I feel we don't know what we're supposed to do. I mean, it was the same when we went to an online learning system.
Very true.
We attended webinars, we attended so many things. We had things in our head that this is how it will work. But when we actually started doing things, there was so many obstacles, so many different challenges. So when do we start? Unless and until we're going to start, I don't know if I'm going to even know what problems I'm going to face.
So just to kind of, pick your head on that, Anu, I mean, fantastic. Firstly, kudos to you guys. And I think at the end of the day, fortune favors the brave, as they say. But what I would be keen to understand is that before you went into those 2 weeks, what was the exercise that you guys did internally? Did you sit down, the key decision makers, and did you say that, okay, this is how we will go about things. This is what we're going to do. This is how the next 2 weeks are going to look like. How did that go?
Yeah, we had the core team, of course, we had a discussion as to how we're going to go about from the entrance of the school into the classroom, how the classrooms have to be sanitized, who were the people who will be in the school, and there won't be, and the total number of people, members inside the school versus, who are coming out. And then we educated the parents about maintaining a social bubble, which is what we as educators, we 5 of us who've been coming to school regularly, and we ensure that we maintain that social bubble. It's from school, home to school, and from school back to home, steaming, bath, and making sure that we keep ourselves healthy. So we talked about these things to the parents. So we had an orientation session for the parents who were interested in sending their children to school. So it was 3 weeks of preparation for the 2 weeks that we did. But we were glad that we took that step and we did that, because in our head, how do we conduct blended learning? How is it going to be? So the child gets to come to school 2 days of the week, and the rest 3 days the child attends sessions online, while these children are in school for those two days. The other children who've not wanting to come to school, their online sessions have to be conducted. So there was a lot of permutation and combinations that had to be worked out. So yeah, 3 weeks of preparation for 2 weeks of, literally 6 sessions.
And that's precisely what I keep emphasizing on, that your preparation is eventually what would determine your success, right, at the end of the day. It's, as someone famously said, right, if I had 1 hour or 2 hours to chop down a tree, I'd spend about 80% of time sharpening my axe, right? And those 3 weeks, I can guarantee you, would have been the most critical, which would have ensured that, right? And that's precisely what I keep talking about, because at the end of the day, yes, we may talk about a lot of concepts, a lot of big words and all of that, but it's coming up with practical solutions that work for you in your school. But unless you have that phase where you're going around that planning and putting it down, right, on paper, so everybody understands it clearly, all stakeholders, including, the students, parents, teachers, everybody, it will work. And I'm sure even after those 2 weeks, you would have had a lot of learnings, which you would have taken with you, which makes you much, much more smarter, probably for an implementation of, I don't know, maybe 4 or 6 weeks later with a much larger size of students.
Idea
Absolutely.
of doing that was for preparation for hope, in the hope that 2021-22 will be an academic year.
Yeah, but it still won't go waste, Anu, and as
No, it
Varun
won't.
said, it's 80% planning, 20% execution. So it's absolutely, I think in that sense, you're on the right track. And I think we'll have to keep tweaking our policies. It's not as if you create something and that policy, right, Varun, is stuck in stone.
Yeah,
Totally.
so can you hear me? Yeah. So Anu, I would say this, that, whenever you have the opportunity, right, if you're able to execute these little ones, right, I mean, they're super critical. In our industry, in our language, we call them drills, right? Unless you're prepared, when a crisis strikes, when an emergency hits you, you won't be able to respond. So it's the entire mind muscle coordination, which is so important, and really, really proud of what you've done. And I would say that if you have more of these weeks, keep doing them, right? And you as a school, you'll have so many lessons to share with other peers, I'm pretty sure.
Thank you so much.
The other breakout rooms have just ended and they're all back into the main room. So I'm going to just take off the spotlight. So we're back into the main room now. Yeah. Yes. So which group would like to go first? Should we go from infrastructure backward? 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1.
Neha, if I could just suggest something, I think Kavita and Prashant, we had a very interesting case study spoken about on this group, which was put forth by Anu, and where she spoke about how their school did a pilot of 2 weeks, right, where they ran it for 2 weeks with 3 weeks planning, right, and they were able to run it successfully, right, and I think that's brilliant, because that's precisely what we keep talking about, that your preparation is key, and everything that we've been talking about, the diagnostic, is part of your prep, and of course also implementation, right? And that was a beautiful case study. I don't know how many more schools or how many more participants right now would have done such a thing, but it'll be interesting to learn about those kind of case studies.
Yeah. Yeah, Prashant, anything on infrastructure that you want to go with?
Yeah. So it was a good, nice, small group, 3 in total, between me, Jayashree, and Sonia. And I think, Sonia, you could perhaps be more voicing of what we were talking of. I think you'd be the best person to talk about.
Thanks, Prashant. Yes. Right. So when I chose to go to infrastructure, I was more looking at infrastructure in these times, and I thought it would be more about resources that we will talk about to make the whole, and being an educator, my whole focus wasn't teaching and learning and looking at resources. But I think it was very interesting where Prashant was coming from, and looking at the physical school and the structure that he proposed, where like a war zone. I mean that's a term he used, where each ecosystem, the space that you design, or you call it a bio bubble, how do we keep it safe? And some of the systems that he suggested, right? Even if you're looking at toilets, looking at classrooms, corridors, how each of them could be zones, and the zones could be managed, with very strict protocols. And the central team just gets reporting if there are any aberrations. So I thought that's a very interesting way to look at it, especially because in our education sector, I feel that, as heads, sometimes we just are so focused on teaching and learning and with parents and students that the whole safety business is always about the administration, or the admin team is handling it, and we don't really care to put the two together. But of course, we talked about certain challenges of having children in a bio bubble in the school, but then they having common spaces like the school bus. And how do you keep the sanctity of that bubble? I think that's one of the challenges we were talking about. And then we just realized that we both are in Noida. Thank you, Prashant.
Thank you so much, Sonia. I think you've nailed it. Thank you. Thanks. Kavita?
Yeah, so inviting Anjali to do a summary.
I think the one thing that we just concluded is that it's not been easy on the social emotional front. It's been rocky. It's been hard to manage. The primary years have had their own challenges, but clearly the middle years, the secondary school hasn't had it particularly easy. It was really nice, actually, even though the time was brief, to hear it, and it always is. And Adhyayan, you all do a fantastic job of just bringing on board all of us who are able to, arrive at a community of, understanding. Just one sec. Sorry about that. And I just think that the idea of sharing really brings forward what all of us have attempted to do, what all of us have, reconciled with. We did realize that the year was not steadily one kind or with one set of challenges. And so at least the group that was there was able to articulate how they've made their attempts, they've made their changes. And I know that for us, particularly, some of the changes are here to stay, and we would actually like to go ahead and implement them. reopening is going to bring its own hard, tough aspects. We're going to have protocols in place which are going to involve distancing. And that's the hardest thing to tell students who are dying to, shake hands, high fives, bump each other, in the corridors, and then to say, stay away because it's not safe. And you induce another level of anxiety, which you don't want to, not in a safe space that you want to create for them. So all in all, social and emotional well-being, the most fragile in terms of the year gone by.
You're not audible properly, Anjali. Suddenly disappeared.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Just that I think it's going to be the repercussions of this hit are not something that are easy to quantify today and may not even be able to have very strong understanding of it in the very
Hey, Anjali, I think the audio is gone again. So could you?
Sorry. Can you?
Yeah, you actually sort of start off perfectly and then you're going to become inaudible.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Would somebody else like to take on, Kavita, if you can move
sure.
on?
I think, Anjali, you kind of pretty much said what happened, where everybody's expressed their sense of regret at the fact that children have to be dealing with something like this, and also the issue of how do we role model as adults. I mean, when we see teachers themselves not being able to keep their mask on and getting too close, then it becomes really tough for children to say, well, why should we, and that whole business of being able to to be safe without feeling anxious about what is going to happen if and that's where the whole question about can you learn when you're feeling anxious. So a lot of the discussion, I think, was interestingly around the fact that to be able to deal with social emotional anxiety, a lot of schools have actually reduced the burden of the anxiety around examinations and assessments and taken away that whole focus on the summative assessment to make it far more self-paced learning and far more of assessment through artifacts and work that the children can generate and demonstrate their learning through. So that's been a really interesting shift. And I think it was wonderful to hear that the schools are actually determined to keep that even after they come back to face-to-face. So that sounds brilliant. So yeah, I think we also have a rapid fire round of questions that were picked up before this session began, from questions that were sent by the people who were interested in what can we do to make ourselves and our students safe. So we're going to quickly flash them, and Varun and Prashant, you get like 30 seconds to quickly respond to these.
Yeah, what I could do, Kavita, is that I could just, I'm not flashing the questions, but I'll say the questions so that we are able to.
I just want to say this is also open to everybody else in the room. So anybody who wants to take their 30 seconds, please unmute and do so as well. Yeah.
Great. So we have some questions around the social well-being of students during pandemic. So it's a statement, but the question is about what about the social well-being of students during this pandemic? Accountability of teachers in the well-being of the child. So there are two questions around the well-being, social well-being, and generally the well-being of the child. So.
And you say it's about teacher accountability.
Yes, and the teacher accountability for well-being.
How does one hold a teacher accountable?
So anybody who'd like to take that question?
Would you be able to expand that a little bit? Because how do you make the teacher accountable? To me, I'm still trying to grapple. In what dimension, context would that be?
As in beyond being just accountable for the academic learning or the ability to master their subject matter, how do you hold them accountable also for the way the children feel? So not just in terms of what they know and learn, but how they feel.
Yes, yeah. Sorry, I'm clueless. I can't. I don't have answers like this. That can.
Yeah. So
I
one
don't
of the
know.
things
For some
that,
reason.
yeah,
Yeah.
one of the things interestingly in the group that I think was articulated beautifully in terms of like, how do you actually develop a bonding with your students if you do not see them and don't meet them? How do students and teachers develop a bonding with each other, with and if you don't feel that sense of safety, then what happens to you as a child, right? And I think we have to understand, as educators, and this is something fundamentally important, is to say, if you are online or offline, whatever it is, what tells you that a child feels safe in class? And as a teacher, how do you then make yourself equipped to make that happen, right? So what makes a child feel safe, and how do you know a child feels safe in class? So anybody from, I don't know, Sonia, anybody else? I've seen somebody unmuting. I wasn't sure if I managed to catch anybody there. How do we know? Is there anybody who would like to give us their perspective on this?
Hi, Kavita. Can I add something?
Chitwan, go right ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, hi. Good evening, everyone. In the breakout room, we were just discussing about how, as a teacher in the physical space, you get to see them talking in the corridors or talk to them even in the lunch and the breakfast time. There is a whole lot of perspective that comes in while you're observing them in different domains, which is now restricted to only limited hours that we spend with them, and that is happening online. While I am talking to one of my children in the homeroom, the rest of them are just listening to that conversation. So for that, I think a lot of thing comes um, um, around the way the teacher communicates and creates the safe space even in the online sessions. So the
Yeah. So Chitwan, how would you know if a child is lonely or unhappy or getting in some way teased or bullied, or, I mean, it's hard enough for you to know that in class when they're physically there. How do you know this is happening online? And how do you know that this is not to do with even being told that, well, in your family, somebody had COVID, you're probably a carrier. And, that adds to the mental trauma that kids have already in any case.
Right, right. So I would like to share an anecdote with you where I tried something in my homeroom, and that was more like an emotional check-in, which we would do with the students, that your teachers are available at this time. If you want to log in and have a chit-chat conversation, you can do that. And the same emotional check-in was created for the parents as well in the term one, where there was a huge turmoil where even parents were finding it difficult to find a space that in a 2-3 BHK I have to sit and work. My wife has to work. Both the children are working. So that way, we tried to have a conversation with the parents. It was not at all related to their child's academics, but in general, how they are doing, how are they managing things at home, the food, the things that are happening around them. So I think that helped the parent community believe in the school that yes, these teachers are there for us, and hence the conversations that were happening within the family, I think that also reflected in the child's perspective towards their teachers, that whatever happens, I'm going to tell this to Chitwan ma'am, be it through my drawings, be it through the chat. I think it's important for the facilitator to create that space, that even if you're okay not sharing verbally, you can write a personal message to your teacher. And I have received a lot of personal messages in the chat box that do tells me that yes, in this 1 year, that safe space was created up to an extent. Can't replicate it with the physical space, but yes, we were able to achieve it a little bit.
Yeah.
So,
So other than making time for you to talk to your students, is there something that you did? You said that you made it possible for them to have chats with you independently of other people being able to see or not. So direct chats. But other than that, did you create protocols of any kind? And Prashant also has a question, so he can add to it, and then
Yeah, no. So I want to just add to the observation, but Chitwan, can you first finish your thought process and maybe let me absorb that a little more?
Sure, sure. So a lot of asynchronous activities were being given on the well-being activity. For example, just writing about your superhero. What,
Okay.
suppose in this difficult times, what your superhero could do. If you were your superhero, what were the things you could do? What were the things you could change? That was one example that I'm just sharing. But a regular activity that is going, and it doesn't require any submission that you have to submit it in a particular timeline. It's a self-paced activity that is happening, and it gives a lot of insight about how the child is viewing the entire situation, how the child is viewing himself in the family, where they have to make an illustration of what's so a one fine evening or a one ideal evening that you would like to spend with your family. That is another example. So that way we could see a lot of things that were going in their heads, and we could see them. So that told a lot about the emotional turmoil that they've been going through. So
So
that
what
that
Kavita, yeah, so what Kavita was trying to say was that can this become structured? Can this become more organized and more thoughtfully done with the formative and summative kind of a context, which starts to monitor each child's progress. Could not necessarily be that it needs to happen every day, but over, let's say, every 6 months, every 1 year, every 1 month, whatever be the frequency, and come out in a more organized manner. Am I right, Kavita? Is that
No,
one way of looking at it?
I think it was more of sort of building on what
Oh,
Chitwan was saying. But yeah, I
oh,
mean, that's probably definitely something you would be interested in, because you're looking at how
yeah.
do we make it into a process? How
How
do
do
we
I?
make it into a standard operating procedure?
Absolutely. No, absolutely, Kavita. I think, very many a times we've got this urge that one event makes it a success, and then somewhere that whole peak happens for that event. There is enough amount of noise around it in the school, and there's that much amount of acha hua, bahut, it's very nice. And then suddenly a month down the line, that activity is nowhere in the sight. And what are the learnings out of that is also not followed through in the next. So that's where I see a large amount of good things happening, very very good things happening, but just that it just dies almost instantly. And then there's that whole nurturing feeling that comes only from the teacher, because the teacher would have done that little step, which would have been marked by everyone, but that it does not really become a permanent or a semi-permanent set of uh, of things to do. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm being, yeah. And that's where the kill is, actually, if you really ask me. How much will you keep on innovating? And how, I mean, I understand that there's so many teachers and there's so many ideas, but not everybody would be motivated at one time to do. So some teacher gets motivated somewhere, there's some work that happens, and there's a bubble, and there is excitement, and then there is absolutely that
Yeah, I
fall.
understand. I think what you're pointing at is what we've been pushing a lot as Adhyayan, saying that what is the leadership and management of teaching and learning? How do you make sure that great things being done by one teacher are done by all teachers, so that all children benefit, and that they're all done by all teachers adequately and frequently enough for it to make a difference to everybody's life, right? So that's what you're basically,
Right, that's the process. That
yeah.
is
I
exactly
mean,
but doing it as a process. Yeah.
So we have quite a few interesting questions, and I can see that the time has been ticking really fast. It's
any
6
last
o'clock.
question?
So yes, I can shoot a last question. And I also wanted to mention, because if some people needed to leave, is that that you can have free access to the diagnostic, which will help you to actually look at where you are and identify your strengths and your gaps, and then work around that. And you can contact us for that. If you want to access the diagnostic, please just type free access in the chat and we'll get back to you. Okay, we're not asking you to sign up for any Google form anymore. Just type in saying free access, and we'll take it as a code from you saying that you want this, and we'll send it to you. And the last question is about what is the efficacy of the bio bubbles in schools? So that's the question. Prashant, you're on mute.
Yeah. First, how many schools are doing the bio bubbles? Not, I mean, are they?
Hardly schools are hardly open anymore. But if they, like, even if they do, when they have bio bubbles, like, what is the efficacy? What I mean, like, is it proven that that works?
I think if I can just add over there, if we can probably get Anu, is she still here, Neha?
Yes, Anu's here.
Anu?
They're the ones who tested it. Anu, do you want to talk about it a little bit? Come on, you can't get away with it.
Okay. All right. Just as a brief before I even start, what we tried is a sort of a pilot learning space for our children. We are a very, very small preschool. So our children age group is very small. The numbers are very small. So that really helped. We put across a thought to the parents to understand if they would be interested in bringing the children to school. So there were a set of parents who were interested in doing that. So we had a planning of about 3 weeks, wherein how we would bring the children in from the gate into the classroom, how the classroom would be sanitized, who were allowed in the social bubble, how these batches would be kept separately, and who interacts with each of the groups. And the groups don't mix, the teachers don't mix. However, that said and done, the idea of this whole social bubble was it's home to school, school back to home. When you go home, you take a steam, you take a shower, and you change your clothes, which was in practice with the 5 team members who have been coming to school on an everyday basis since lockdown last year. So we just felt that that was working for us. So we put that thought across to the parents to see if that was acceptable or not. And we did manage. However, it was only for a brief amount of 2 weeks because we didn't want to do an extended session as it was a pilot run to see if something like this would work. So that's what we tried. And we were very clear to our parents saying that this is something we are trying it out our own risk, and it's at your own risk. So we had consent forms that were signed for them to engage in this activity. So
yeah, so you haven't really had the time to see whether that sort of works long term, but I can tell you that in most of the schools in the UK at least, they've had bubbles that that does not mean it prevents children from getting COVID. Bubbles are meant to sort of contain the numbers that will get affected. And so if there's a child within a bubble who has COVID, that entire bubble then stays at home and protects themselves, and then eventually comes back. And the number of times that children have had to go home and the number of bubbles that have had to go home are innumerable. So please, Varun, can you just confirm for me that they don't really stop anybody getting COVID, but they are ways of managing the numbers?
Right now, all the solutions, Kavita, we're talking about reducing the numbers. It's not going to stop. We're all talking about reducing the numbers. So all measures are basically going to be concentrated towards reducing.
Right. So I think that's sort of a perfect point to say that, this is really about how do we manage it. This is not about trying to make an impossible situation happen or promising impossible things to parents and children, saying that, if you do what we say, nothing is going to happen to you. I think this is about what we're hearing from both people here, Varun as well as Prashant, is that the best thing that you can do is get your policies in place, get your protocols in place, take them madly seriously. That's fundamentally important. Ensure test them and try them out and make sure that you catch the errors. If there's something that you must take care of, it's the social emotional learning of the teachers, the students, and how they're feeling right now is more important than what they're learning in terms of the number of the pieces of content. Even if they learn less content, but they feel okay, that's far more important. And I think finally, the infrastructure can be managed. If you want to reach out to Prashant on how to do that and get your protocols in place, do it. If you need to access Varun, you can, and we will send you everybody's contact details. Adhyayan will help you to look at your evidence to see what is it that you might have missed, if there's a gap that you haven't noticed, and that's where we come into the picture. So thank you, everybody, and thank you for the conversation, Varun and Prashant.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kavita, Varun, Neha, and all the others. Thank you so much.
Great. So everybody have a safe weekend and stay home, stay safe.
Yes, and you specifically, Neha, from Bombay context, right? Clearly. Hey, even you, Varun. Huh?
Sure will.
Yeah.
In a bubble.
In a bubble.